Welcome back, and for our last lecture for this week, let us do something rather simple and rather slow so that you get a sense of how is it that we are bringing together these concepts. Let's read directly from Feminism is for Everybody. These were the chapters we went through: Feminist Politics, Consciousness Raising, Sisterhood is Still Powerful, Feminist Education for Critical Consciousness, Our Bodies, Our Cells, Beauty Within and Without, Feminist Class Struggle, Global Feminism, Women at Work, Race and Gender, Ending Violence, Feminist Masculinity, Feminist Parenting, Liberating Marriage and Partnership, A Feminist Sexual Politic, Lesbianism, Feminism, Love Again, Feminist Spirituality and Visionary Feminism for later. Looks like you've done a lot already, so you can congratulate yourselves. Let me, for this last session, take a few excerpts from each of these chapters so you get a sense of how is it that Hooks is making this argument. This is also your first introduction in this course to reading theory. So I'm going to go slow, and I suggest you do too. The beauty about Hooks is that she is very easy to read. So lest you be fooled by this tone, I promise you harder texts are coming your way. But until then, I think this is a really great introduction to reading theory itself, and perhaps what I would suggest to be an even better template for how to write in a way that people can relate to, in a way that speaks about important concepts while keeping the everyday firmly at the center of what we read and write about. Let's get to feminist politics. Let's start with paragraph 2, where she says, as all advocates of feminist politics know, most people do not understand sexism, or if they do, they think it is not a problem. Masses of people think that feminism is always and only about women seeking to be equal to men, and a huge majority of these folks think feminism is anti-male. Their misunderstanding of feminist politics reflects the reality that most folks learn about feminism from patriarchal mass media. Here she is doing two things. She is gesturing to a popular understanding of feminism. She is telling you that such a popular understanding comes from overwhelmingly patriarchal media, also controlled by patriarchal sexist interests, and she is offering you a different model of writing about sexism and about feminist politics. The feminism they hear about the most is portrayed by women who are primarily committed to gender equality, equal pay for equal work, and sometimes women and men sharing household chores and parenting. Now, this is important in relation to media, because how many of you will remember, or perhaps are seeing around you, that a lot of popular advertising, for instance, is very interested in perpetuating this idea of equality. The washing machine that is so easy to understand that even a man can run it. And this is the kind of feminism that people are both railing against and celebrating. They see that these women are usually white and materially privileged. The equivalent over here is that we see people who are running washing machines as people who can afford washing machines and running water and electricity, a particular privileged set in our context. They know from mass media that women's liberation focuses on the freedom to have abortions, to be lesbians, to challenge rape and domestic violence. Among these issues, masses of people agree with the idea of gender equity in the workplace, equal pay for equal work. Pay close attention to the next part, because you will have to modify your understanding in relation to your own context or milieu. Since our society continues to be primarily a Christian culture, here Hooks is speaking about America, masses of people continue to believe that God has ordained that women be subordinate to men in the domestic household. Even though masses of women have entered the workforce, even though many families are headed by women, the vision of domestic life which continues to dominate the nation's imagination is one in which the logic of male domination is intact, whether men are present in the home or not. The logic of male domination. Here, break it down in relation to events in your own daily life and see what are the logics that are at play that provide certain positions of labor and privilege to men and women. Let me move on then to another section of this chapter, speaking about reformist versus revolutionary feminism. Here on page 4, we start with, from its earliest inception, feminist movement was polarized. Reformist thinkers chose to emphasize gender equality. Revolutionary thinkers did not want simply to alter the existing system so that women would have more rights. We wanted to transform that system to bring an end to patriarchy and sexism. Now, Hooks is clearly identifying as a revolutionary thinker where she says we. Now, this is another important thing to remember. In a text like this, Hooks is free to take positions. She wants to tell you that this is her flavor of feminist thinking. It does not mean that there is a call for that kind of feminism to be the only true feminism. There are ways in which you must understand it in your own context to make that decision. Towards the end of the chapter, come to the end of page 5, where Hooks speaks about lifestyle feminism, where she says, lifestyle feminism ushered in the notion that there could be as many versions of feminism as there were women. Suddenly, the politics was being slowly removed from feminism. Here, she is making a very, very important point that a feminism that is apolitical is not really feminism, it is merely consumption. Towards the end of the chapter, you can see a little bit of hopelessness in Hooks because she says, feminist politics is losing momentum because feminist movement has lost clear definitions. We have those definitions, let's reclaim them, let's share them, let's start over. This might be something that you can relate to in relation to how the feminist movement is currently shaping up across the world. You find different contested versions, and one might not be wrong for thinking that there has been a dilution and one is not really sure what's going on. Go back to Hooks and think about the ways in which she understands the core purpose of the feminist movement. In the second chapter, we start with the statement, feminists are made, not born. One does not become an advocate of feminist politics simply by having the privilege of having been born female. Here she's doing something fun. She's speaking about having been born female as a privilege, which seems so counterintuitive given the fact that we've only been speaking about oppression and atrocities. But she says you cannot advocate feminist politics just because you're a woman. You have to earn it. You have to learn it. You have to understand that just your subjectivity as a woman does not allow for your automatic education as a feminist activist or a feminist theorist. She is gesturing to the fact of coming to consciousness. When women first organized in groups to talk together about the issues of sexism and male domination, they were clear that females were as socialized to believe sexist thinking and values as males, the difference being simply that males benefit from sexism more than females and were as a consequence less likely to want to surrender patriarchal privilege. This is the heart of a lot of stuff that Hooks is saying in this chapter. Revolutionary feminist consciousness raising emphasized the importance of learning about patriarchy as a system of domination, how it became institutionalized, and how it is perpetuated and maintained. Here, Hooks is gesturing to structural thinking. How is it that patriarchy functions as a system? How it is institutionalized? How is it that it spreads in various forms of institutional thinking? And how is it perpetuated and maintained? All systems need maintenance. They need regular feeding. Otherwise, they begin to show the cracks in their assumptions. And this is where Hooks is locating revolutionary action. You keep questioning it on all fronts, in all ways, and somewhere it will begin to break down. Here's an important part of this chapter. Hooks says early on in the contemporary feminist movement, consciousness-raising groups often became settings where women simply unleashed pent-up hostility and rage about being victimized with little or no focus on strategies of intervention and transformation. Reminds you a little of talk shows on television where everybody comes out saying everything that they've been feeling, and at the end of it, you as the audience are left thinking, what the hell is going on? Why is it that they're yelling at one another, where it's all about a certain kind of letting go of feelings with no idea of the end game? What happens after this? What are strategies? What are solutions? And Hooks wants us to focus on these strategies. At the same time, she is not so critical that she does not understand that consciousness raising early on was the site where women uncovered and openly revealed the depths of their intimate wounds. Their confessional aspect served as a healing ritual, and such a healing is also important to the feminist movement. Unless you are allowed to make your feelings legible, how is it that you will seek to change the structure that perpetuates these kinds of feelings? Through consciousness raising, women gain the strength to challenge patriarchal forces at work and at home. And this gaining of strength is also an important goal for the movement. The first paragraph of the chapter, Sisterhood is Still Powerful, is a powerful one. Hooks says, when the slogan, Sisterhood is Powerful, was first used, it was awesome. I began my full-fledged participation in feminist movement my sophomore year in college, attending an all-women's college for a year before I transferred to Stanford University. I knew from first-hand experience the difference in female self-esteem and self-assertion in same-sex classrooms versus those where males were present. And this is perhaps an early introduction to the idea of sisterhood, the ways in which women feel safer with other women around. The often repeated joke of women going to bathrooms together or always hanging out together, or even in public space, how women cluster together while men are in another part of the same public space. And here Hooks is speaking about the fact that only women seem to understand what other women are going through. We remember from the last lecture that this is not true of all women. Such empathetic understanding is also interrupted by race, class and caste, but nevertheless, sisterhood is the understanding that the gender experience is common to a large set of women, and therefore such kind of safety is a symptom of the ways in which patriarchal domination subjects women to similar kinds of oppressions. Hooks moves on through personal experience, leading us to follow her in her own journey of understanding sexism and internalized sexism. She says, at Stanford, my ability was constantly questioned. I began to doubt myself. Then feminist movement rocked the campus. Female students and professors demanded an end to discrimination based on gender inside and outside the classroom. It was an intense and awesome time. There I took my first women's studies class with the writer Tilly Olson, who compelled her students to think first and foremost about the fate of women from working class backgrounds. There the scholar and one-day biographer of Anne Sexton, Diane Middlebrook, passed out one of my poems in our class on contemporary poetry with no name on it and asked us to identify whether the writer was male or female, an experiment that made us think critically about judging the value of writing on the basis of gender biases. There I began to write my first book at the age of 19, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism. None of these incredible transformations would have happened without feminist movement creating a foundation for solidarity between women, hence sisterhood. The foundation rested on our critique of what we then call the enemy within, referring to our internalized sexism. In Feminist Education for Critical Consciousness, Hooks speaks about the ways in which the feminist movement moved forward in its educational impetus before women's studies classes, before feminist literature, individual women learning about feminism in groups. They were the first to begin to create feminist theory, which included both an analysis of sexism, strategies for challenging patriarchy, and new models of social interaction, all of which were important. And this is where feminist theory is an important aspect of this class, because we are doing all of these things. We are talking about the ways in which patriarchy surrounds us and undergirds our own ways of living, but we are also suggesting strategies for challenging patriarchy and producing new models of social interaction. Now, here is something Hooks says that I firmly believe that a lot of people might have trouble thinking about, where she says everything we do in life is rooted in theory, and people don't like theory. They think of it as something removed from everyday life, something that troubles us, something that should be left to academic ivory towers. But here Hooks is proposing that theory is something that runs through our lives, that structures ways in which we behave and live in society, and therefore only through producing theory can we bring about change. Whether we consciously explore the reasons we have a particular perspective or take a particular action, there is also an underlying system shaping thought and practice. In its earlier inception, feminist theory had as its primary goal explaining to women and men how sexist thinking worked and how we could challenge and change it. Think about it as really an imaginative form of engaging with everyday life and asking as to the structures of meaning through which we make our lives valuable or mean something in the world. She goes on to say, in those days, most of us have been socialized by parents and society to accept sexist thinking. Think about the multiple times when you may have questioned something and somebody just said, that's just the way that it is. Don't ask too many questions, right? It's the asking too many questions that society fears, because if you ask questions, then answers will have to be provided, and sometimes the answer is, that's just the way it is. So what is this way is what feminist theory is intent upon deconstructing. We had not taken time to figure out the roots of our perceptions. Feminist thinking and feminist theory urged us to do that. Through the chapter, Bell Hooks takes us through the history of such kind of feminist education, but ends by saying, if we do not work to create a mass-based movement which offers feminist education to everyone, females and males, feminist theory and practice will always be undermined by the negative information produced in most mainstream media. And this is where your role becomes important, because in listening to lectures like these, asking questions, challenging a lot of the things that I may even be saying, or reading the text closely, you offer alternate models of understanding feminist theory. And very importantly, the revolutionary statement, she says, feminist knowledge is for everybody. It is not a choice. In Our Bodies, Ourselves, Bell Hooks is concerned with both the sexual revolution and its consequences. Now remember, the sexual revolution is particular to the United States and has got to do with a point in American history where men and women found it possible to be able to understand sexuality in a liberated fashion, to understand it outside the clutches of heterosexual partnership or monogamous partnership. And it is often spoken about in terms of flower power or the hippie generation. And Hooks is concerned with how, when the so-called sexual revolution was at its peak, the issue of free love brought females face to face with the issue of unwanted pregnancy. And in this, she brings us to the heart of what is now framed as the abortion or the choice versus the right to life debate, the latter often undergirded by specific kinds of religious compulsions. Hooks goes on to say the abortion issue captured the attention of mass media because it really challenged the fundamentalist thinking of Christianity. It directly challenged the notion that a woman's reason for existence was to bear children. And this is nothing short of revolutionary, because in challenging this, you're challenging the foundations of all societies as we know them. We then move on to the chapters on beauty within and without, which is again about the female body in relation to norms of beauty. And we are talking about feminist class struggles, and we spent some time on this in the previous lecture. Here, look at what Hooks is writing. She says, from the onset of the movement, women from privileged classes were able to make their concerns the issues that should be focused on, in part because they were the group of women who received public attention they attracted mass media. So even when the feminist movement was able to make inroads into public consciousness, there were only a certain set of middle and upper class women who were able to be heard, also because they had cultural capital, which means language, comportment, ways in which they presented themselves, ways in which they were attractive to media consumers. The issues that were most relevant to working women or masses of women were never highlighted by mainstream mass media. Betty Friedan's The Feminist Mystique identified the problem that has no name as the dissatisfaction females feel about being confined and subordinated in the home as housewives. While this issue was presented as a crisis for women, it really was only a crisis for a small group of well-educated white women. While they were complaining about the dangers of confinement in the home, a huge majority of women in the nation were in the workforce. And many of these working women who put in long hours for low wages while still doing all the work in the domestic household would have seen the right to stay home as freedom. And here she is illuminating an important paradox, because if the fight was for women to be able to work outside, there were millions of women who were working under abominable conditions and bad pay that would have given anything to have the opposite. I hope by now you have a sense of how is it that we are reading for concepts in each of these chapters. So try and read while keeping in mind particular sections of the last lecture so that you have conceptual clarity, and part of the assignment for this week will include clarifications on these concepts as well as examples of particular chapters. Besides that, please also remember that the last 4 chapters we are covering over the course of this course and not necessarily in the first week. Also remember the importance that concepts like violence have for bell Hooks' vision of the goals of the feminist movement and the ways in which it can change society fundamentally and constitutively. Next week we will return with other kinds of concepts from a different book, and there we will get a little bit more precise and introduce you to the world of feminist theory. Thank you.